sophisticated since. And here we have an image of the sheet music, and just before I left New Orleans to come here, I found this article from 1953, also from the Hartford Courant, where it talked about that Harold Rome had donated a published copy of his score for Wish You Were Here for funds to build a new synagogue, and if my research was correct, the synagogue may eventually have been Tikva Kodashot. That's the best I could find out. I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe that was what the fundraiser was for. Now, I think everybody here is going to know the title tune from Wish You Were Here, and it charted in the millions, and here it is sung by the inimitable Eddie Fisher.
Someone's painting the leaves around. Wish you were here. Why did the birds change their song?
Sorry, I just have to do this. Sorry.
Someone's painting the leaves around. Wish you were here. And why did the birds change their song this year? Wish you were here. They're not shining the stars as bright. They're stolen the joy from the night. Wish you were here. Wish you were here. Wish you were here.
I remember my parents had the 45 of this growing up. It was a very famous record on RCA. I hope you like how I did the little circle image. I wanted it to look like a vintage television screen. PowerPoint can be very accommodating sometimes. So let's talk a moment on Harold Rome's philosophy on writing for the musical theater. He would say, his songs come out of the shows, but all of my songs are written to solve a specific problem in advancing the musical to communicate ideas, character, and story. He was often asked, did he write the lyrics or the music first? Apparently that's a question that interviewers are dying to know the answer. And he said, nothing comes first. It begins with an idea. I ask what the song is there for. I try to write music with a point, music for use. And I especially like what he said about emotion. When the emotion is too great for speech, the characters must sing. And that quote has been attributed to several composers through the years, but I do like to think that it started with Harold Rome. And another interesting thing, he was an architect, as I mentioned, and his songs are very often incredibly brief. There's no non-useful material in the song. They're very concise. They're superbly constructed. So I like to think that he used his architectural training to actually create songs that got to the point very, very quickly. His next musical was also a hit, and that is the musical play Fanny. And that starred the great Basso Ezio Pinza, and it also starred Florence Henderson, and I have to say, AKA Carol Brady of the Brady Bunch. And she was only 19 years old at the time. The show was a huge hit, and it takes place in the French port of Marseille, which shows how Harold Rome was going to shows set in New York, or just shows set in the Catskills, and now he's in France. I like to include color in my PowerPoints whenever I can, because in the 1950s, it's unusual to find really good quality color pictures. And here you have some scenes from the show. You see Florence Henderson, Ezio Pinza, and another co-star, Walter Schlesig. Another nice graphic is lyrics to one of the songs from Fanny, written in Harold Rome's own hand. And of course, a song from Fanny, and it seemed like in the 1950s, Eddie Fisher was becoming quite the Harold Rome specialist.
The boy with no heart to give, Fanny, Fanny, Fanny. Loud would one hear you cry, Fanny, oh Fanny, goodbye, Fanny, oh Fanny.
I wish Eddie Fisher had done a whole album of Harold Rome. It would have been quite something. On the handout that you have, I list all of the YouTube links to the various Harold Rome shows. If anybody wants to email me, my email is on the handout. I can send you the same document back as a Word file, and the links will be live. So if you open it on your computer, you click, you can actually go to the actual files and have the songs in full. Now here's probably my all-time favorite Harold Rome song, because when we did it in New Orleans in 2020, it had probably not been performed anywhere since 1958. And it is called Boom Ba. And Harold Rome was commissioned to write this for the 10th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. So I asked our cantor at Truro Synagogue, Cantor Kevin Margolius, and our rabbi, Rabbi Katie Bowman, if they would sing this at our Harold Rome program. And of course they agreed, but they didn't know that I had snuck a tape recorder in there so I could have a souvenir of it. And wait till you hear the song. It is unbelievable.
Young is the nation, its years are 10. Old is the hope that renew again. Firm is the tree born of faith and tears, burning eternal over the years in the hearts of men. You can't keep the wind from blowing, can't keep the tide from flowing, can't keep the spring from turning again, and you can't keep the tree from growing. The tree that has become Israel. Boom-ba, boom-ba, boom-ba.
Far is the journey that's just begun. Hard is the task waiting to be done. Strong is the faith that her people feel. Stronger than armies, stronger than steel, till the dream is won. Boom-ba, can't keep the days from going. Boom-ba, can't keep the stars from showing. Boom-ba, can't keep the sun from shining again, and you can't keep the dream from growing. The dream that has become Israel. Boom-ba, boom-ba, boom-ba. Boom-ba, boom-ba, boom-ba.
Harold Rome had gone to Israel with the son of Rabbi Stephen Wise, very famous rabbi, and he said to the newspapers that he felt at home in Israel the minute he set foot, and he couldn't imagine that he would feel that way, but it made him very, very happy. So now we have another very popular Harold Rome show, and this is called Destry Rides Again. And you probably know the movie. The movie starred James Stewart and Marlene Dietrich. For Broadway, it starred Andy Griffith, famous from TV's Andy Griffith Show, and another great Broadway performer, Dolores Gray. And just to show you that it makes a village, it really takes a village to put together one of these programs, the image on the right is a cut song, a song that wasn't used in Destry Rides Again, and it came from the Gilmore Music Library at Yale University. Last year I was able to go to their archive and study the sheet music of Harold Rome, and they were wonderful about letting me scan some of the images. The song that you will hear is one of the great torch songs of all time, and it's called I Say Hello, although I'm starting the song a little late, so the singer actually starts saying I say goodbye, but it's still the same song.
Goodbye. I don't mean goodbye. I mean, darling, why must I go? Oh, how I love you. Now, you'll never know.
One thing about Harold Rome is the tremendous variety in his melody. You couldn't say, oh, that sounds like Harold Rome, because all of the songs sound different and all of the songs are truly wonderful. At the same time as Dusty Rides Again on Broadway, Harold Rome came back to Hartford for a gala return, along with another very famous Hartford native, Sophie Tucker. And the image that you see here is of absolutely courtesy of the Jewish Historical Society of Greater Hartford, and thank you for that. And you see Harold Rome on the left, Sophie Tucker on the right. It was a huge success. It was a benefit for Emmanuel Synagogue, and 1,400 people went to this event. They bought tickets for it, so it must have raised a lot of money. And the reviewer talked about how Harold Rome sang for his mother and sister, who made it in the front row, and compared his voice to Jimmy Durante, which I'm not sure is a compliment, but I wouldn't take it as a compliment. But in any case, one of the best things they said, and again, this goes back to what I spoke of earlier on in the program, that Harold Rome had the ability to set everyday thoughts and occurrences to music. He wrote about everyday people, so this was a wonderful gala in 1960. Now we come to another one of his most famous shows, and again, compositionally, it's different from anything he'd ever written. And this is I Can Get It For You Wholesale, based on the Jerome Wyman novel of the same name. And this was the show that introduced Barbra Streisand to Broadway. It's a fascinating story. It's very gritty about the 7th Avenue garment district in the 1930s. Elliot Gould was the star of the show, and this is where he and Barbara met and got married. And Streisand had a breakout song, and it was called Miss Marmalstein. And it was the song, the show, that put her on the map. Now, another wonderful bit of information that I got from the society here in Hartford is a letter from the director of I Can Get It For You Wholesale, Arthur Lawrence. And this shows just how intense the creative process was in bringing a Broadway show to life. Harold Rome had been on vacation, he came back, and Arthur Lawrence says, welcome back, back to work. And then he talks about polishing and cutting the show, and he thinks it's good. But this is very interesting. A director saying to the composer, I think the music is the best you have written, but I would like it to be the best you are capable of writing. And that's a really heavy duty to give to somebody, saying, I like what you've done, but it could be even better. And they did a lot of rewriting of the show, and it was very well received, and ran on Broadway for about a year, and then toured for about a year and a half after that. And just a little plug for Classic Stage Company in New York. It's going to be revived in New York this fall for the first time since 1962. There will be a professional production of it. The song that we will hear next is another live musical performance. And the open with the song is a recitative, meaning it's just words sung to a slight melody, letting us know what the character is thinking. And the song is really considered to be a microcosm of Jewish life in the 1930s, in 1930s New York. Ruthie Rifkin, who sings the song, is pining over her love for Harry Bogan, and Harry Bogan, to put it plainly, is something of a jerk.
New York is a wonderful town, a very stimulating place to be. It's full of galleries and exhibitions, most are absolutely free. And concerts like at the Lewiston Stadium, plus at Carnegie Hall. Music way up top, but it's wonderful acoustics. That's where it sounds best of all. Art lectures at the Metropolitan. I attended ancient Greece the other day. The modern dance and ballet at the YMWHA. And legitimate plays on Broadway. Don't you think Odex is great? Not downstairs, of course. We get last-minute balcony down at Gray's Cut Rate. What better way can a single girl with leisure spare time find than to go around, broaden out her background, also improve her mind? Plus, it gives more chance for meeting up with people, wouldn't you say? Such as certain members of the opposite sex she hopes to get involved with someday. And who can tell? Who knows when they might come one's way? Who knows when I'll see him? Who knows? Or why it will be him? Who knows? Perfect he doesn't have to be, good looking, rich and smart, long as he's crazy after me and we see heart to heart. Who knows when he'll be there? Who knows? One day he'll see me there and hold out his arms. First he'll kiss me, say he loves me, and then propose. But why, when? Who knows? One day he'll see me there and hold out his arms. First he'll kiss me, say he loves me, and then propose. But why, where, who knows?
I know I just said that I thought that Boombah was my favorite Harold Brown song, but after hearing the song sung and played so beautifully, I think I've changed my mind. I'm crazy about Who Knows, and thank you, that was magnificent. So again, a little bit of color for I Can Get It For You Wholesale, very much in the 1950s, 60s color scheme. In the center, you have Lillian Roth, a very famous performer of the, basically going from the 1930s through the 1970s. And the gentleman who's hugging her, that's Elliot Gould playing Harry Bogan. Now, we can't leave the program without hearing a little bit of Barbra Streisand doing her famous show-stopping Miss Marvel scene. In fact, Leonard Bernstein at the opening night stood up and cheered. He yelled bravo after she finished the song, and she wheeled around the stage on an office chair as she sang it. It put her on the map, and we know what a legendary, unique career that has been. This is from YouTube, and it's something on YouTube. And a star was born. In 1963, Harold Rome came back to Hartford for an African art exhibit. Collecting African art was a passion of his, and he went to the Wadsworth Athenaeum, where this exhibit took place. After his death, I believe some of the pieces are in the Smithsonian. That's how important his art collection was. He collected it for years. Now we come to a play with music called The Zulu and the Zeta. And that's a good segue from the African art mention, because the show itself takes place in Johannesburg, South Africa, and it's a very powerful play with music about apartheid. And the Zeta was played by famous Yiddish actor of the Yiddish stage in New York, Menashe Skolnick. And the Zulu actually has a name in the show. His name is Paulus. Was played by Louis Gossett, who went on to a lot of fame in his acting career. There's an incredible song in The Zulu and the Zeta, and it's called Rivers of Tears. I personally have sung this live a couple of times in concert, but during COVID lockdown, I did a Harold Rome program, and I commissioned a sort of orchestral backing track, so I have a film of it, and I'm very, very honored to share it with you. Beautiful sentiment, Rivers of Tears. In the show, there was a glossary.
Zeta is a play with music written in 1965. The play is full of wonderful Yiddish dialogue, and in fact there was a booklet given out at the theater with a multilingual glossary. In the song you will hear, Rivers of Tears, one man tries to explain to his friend why there are bad things in the world. A song from the old country. Rivers of tears cannot change it. Rivers and rivers of tears. We will now hear this beautiful song. If there is no darkness, then where is the light? If there are no shadows, what corner is bright? How can people climb up with nowhere to fall? Who is the giant if all men are called? That's the way of the world. God is wisdom, the way of the world. That's the way that it is. Rivers of tears cannot change. Rivers and rivers of tears. If we have no weak ones, would be strong without room for quiet? How could there be song? How can hearts be mended if they never break? With sleep for no one, then how would we wake? That's the way of the world. God is wisdom, the way of the world. That's the way that it is. And rivers of tears cannot change it. Rivers and rivers of tears. With the dust beneath us, which way is the sky? Who knows what the truth is, with nothing alive? If there are no strangers, then who is a friend? Where is beginning if there is no end? That's the way of the world. God is wisdom, the way of the world. That's the way that it is, and rivers of tears cannot change it. Rivers and rivers of
So turn your living room into a recording studio. Okay. So even though The Zulu and the Zeta was Harold Rome's last work for Broadway, he actually, again, this man's imagination and enthusiasm were boundless. He wrote a musical version of Gone with the Wind. And it premiered in Japan in 1970 in Japanese, where it was called Scarlet. Then in 1972, it went to London, and then there was a US national tour. There was hopes and thoughts to bring it to Broadway. It didn't happen, but it was recorded both in Japanese and in English. It's an amazing score. It's a worthy adaptation of this wonderful novel, and it's really worth seeking out. And again, true to Harold Rome, Gone with the Wind, he treated it as a cry for pacifism. That's what he found out of the story, and that's how he worked it into the musical. In 1978, he came back to Hartford again to do a one-man show at the Old Place Theater. And this is where he would sing songs, tell stories about his life and career. And he commented with much happiness that he still had many relatives and friends living in Hartford. Everywhere he went, he ran into people that he knew, and there were dozens of people at his dressing room door to say hello to him. Now, there's a funny anecdote. The visit to Hartford was not the only time he did this one-person show, and first started in New York. And he said, I'm not a cabaret artist, I'm not a nightclub singer, I'm a composer. And they said, Mr. Rome, you'll get $2,000 a week. He paused. I'm a nightclub artist. And that was the end of the story. And he had great success, did it for quite a number of years. He was a great interpreter of his own music. He returned in 1986, a visit to East Haddam. It was because the Goodspeed Opera House was doing a production of Fanny. And again, he talked about his history in Rome, having gone to Trinity College for a time, the different addresses that his family had lived in. And I found a picture that I think would be the original Rome family home at 386 Sigourney Street. And so I think it's very nice to be able to combine the picture with the article. But every time it was Old Home Week, he came to Hartford and he was happy to be here and greeted by so many people. And this may have been one of his last visits to the city. In his later years in life, many honors were bestowed upon him. He was elected to the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1981. He received the ASCAP, Richard Rogers Lifetime Achievement Award. Richard Rogers and his wife were longtime friends. 1991, the Drama Desk Award. 1991, also the Theater Hall of Fame. A few years before his death, and I think he felt maybe that the end was near, he said, I think I'm the luckiest man in the world to have had the training I did before and to have been able to do it and to have the people I worked with. It was almost as though he knew the end was near and he was trying to save the day. Harold Rome died in New York on October 26, 1993 from complications of a stroke. He was 85 years old. It was certainly a life well lived. Billboard magazine summed up his career by again praising him for songs that not only gently prodded the social conscience of Americans, but with equal aplomb, Billboard's own words, formed a catalog of soaring ballads for the Broadway stage, many of which you've been able to hear this afternoon. And going back to the title tune from Wish You Were Here, which Eddie Fisher sang so well, and at least one person did right. They're not shining the stars as bright, they've stolen the joy from the night. Wish he were here. And I was able, again, using Ancestry to find out where his grave plot is. And it was really very touching to see that the inscription, it's kind of hard to read in the picture. It says, anyone would love you, especially Florence, Joshua, and Rachel. Florence's wife, Joshua, and Rachel, the two children. The musical quote is from Destry Rides Again. So I thought it would be a fitting conclusion just to hear a little bit of the song, and you'll see why they chose it as a quote. The singer is Judy Collins.
Love you, anyone at all. Anyone with any sense is bound to fall. I'm sure that anyone whose heart is free, meeting you would say, here's love at last. Is every lonely dream come true? Oh, anyone believe me?
So thank you very much. Thank you for coming. The hour went by so very quickly, but if there's time for questions, I'd be happy to answer any. And again, my email's on there. I'd love to hear from you or to suggest other Harold Rome recordings. I will tell you, one of the greatest sources of pride for me was I read a little blurb about myself. I don't usually read things about myself, but it said, Harold Rome Authority, and I like that. I felt very proud of that. So
George has very kindly offered us a little drawing for one of you lucky people to take home today. It's Destry Rides Again. So I have randomly generated the number 8 from my computer. So I'm going to start from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that goes to. You're fine. Do people have questions or comments or?
So how did you get your interest in Harold Rome? How did that all happen?
That's a story I can answer. I was in New York in 2019, and I was doing a podcast on Mary Martin. And one of the people mentioned to me that they say, I love Harold Rome, and songs are very short, like the opera arias of Puccini. I'm like, Harold Rome, okay. I certainly know his cast albums, but I don't know a lot about him. So I went back to New Orleans and I said, I know I'm supposed to do a Jewish composer lecture in January of 2020, and I know I've selected one. Could I change that completely and do Harold Rome? So they said yes, and that started my enthusiasm for his work, and I never met a Harold Rome song that I didn't like. Yes?
Do you know if there are any relatives in the Hartford area still?
That's a wonderful
or where his
question.
children might be?
Yeah, I have been trying to look. They would be probably great nieces or nephews, I think. the sister moved away, and her family was out of town reading the various obituaries. But I would like to think that there would still be maybe at Emmanuel Synagogue.
There were certainly members by the last name of Rome at the Emmanuel. I have not been able to ask them, but the synagogue you mentioned that he helped to found has since merged with Rabbi Cantor's Shul Tikva Shalom. So the synagogue is still there. There might be some information about him from that synagogue, but we do have Rome's in the area, and I know actually the pianist Alex, who just left, also knows another local Rome. So there are leads to be followed, but I don't know about any actual.
His sister-in-law, well, Cindy and Ruth lived in West Parkway. They have a daughter who was a daughter, and she was in Emmanuel, remember? She used to go to Leah every year with her grandchildren.
It's so wonderful to hear the history, but I know that some of the family members had moved away, but the latest obituary, I think, for the brother Milton showed that there should be still family members here.
Hugh Rome, I think, ran for governor. He was very active on the board of University of Connecticut, UConn. And there was a Rome, and all the Romes, I believe, were related. There was a Rome who was police commissioner.
Well,
Yes, I think those are cousins, Lou Rome and
there were two
Jack
Louis
Rome,
Romes.
who ran the Honus Oyster House in downtown Hartford.
Oh, yeah.
I believe they were cousins.
Well, there were two Louis Romes. And so that was like, I started doing the research, and all the things that you found, and then when I got further down, I said, I don't think that was Harold Rome's father, it was somebody with the same name. Interesting.
He was about a couple years older than me. In fact, he and I were ushers at a wedding.
Okay. Because there was a Mrs. Louis Rome that shows up in various synagogue organizations, and that wasn't Harold Rome's mother. So I'm still getting to the bottom of that. Ancestry's only guiding me so far. Very interesting.
Well, my maiden name is Katz, but the history, the family lore is we were related to Harold Rome and the Rome who owned Oyster House, but I don't know how. I don't know where the connection was.
Between the two of us, George
We'll get it. Because in the obituary for Milton, it talked about his businesses because he left the charcoal industry at some point, and then he had maybe like almost like a packaged liquor industry or something like that. It's in the obituary notice. But I'm still working on that aspect. It's too interesting. Yes.
Who was the composer that you blew off in New Orleans?
It was Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick. But they forgave me, not the composers, but the choral folks forgave me, and so I did that program last December. So actually, I might be lying to you. It might have been Jerry Herman. There was one of the two that I said, whomever we've set up, let's do Harold Rome instead, because I announced at the program, I think these songs were being performed in New Orleans for the very first time, and I know Boom Bop was, because nobody did that song since 1958. Yes.
Thank you so much for a wonderful program.
Oh, my pleasure.
One of your items mentioned a concert at the Old Place Theater in 78. I'm not familiar with that theater, but I remember that my husband and I went to a memorable concert by Harold Rome in person, very informal concert at the old location of the Hartford Stage Public.
And this was in the same year, or?
It could have been.
Yeah, but I think Old Place is not there anymore. It's not a function.
I've never heard of that.
It used to be at Talcott Street.
Okay.
Yes, that's called the Old Place.
But what I love is the whole arc of his career. If you think about it, when we moved to New York in the mid-1930s, that from 1940 to 1986 and beyond, he came back here regularly for events, concerts, museum exhibits, whatever. It showed that his heart was always here, no matter that Fifth Avenue in New York had become where he lived.
And it was Sophie Tucker who donated the stage to the Emmanuel Synagogue. Money she raised.
And also, speaking of Sophie Tucker, if you're ever in New York, off of 8th Avenue, there's a synagogue called the Actors Synagogue, and it was founded by Sophie Tucker and Al Jolson. How's that for theatrical history? It's funny, I went there for a service and I had to see a show. So I spoke with the rabbi and I said, I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole service. She said, nobody does. They all need a 10 of 8 to get to their theater. So.
I'd just like to give a special thank you to Cantor Risman and for accompanying us. We appreciate it very much. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm sure you'll be happy
Please email me if you don't mind to. I'd love to talk more Harold Rome.
Did you give me this little purple survey? How are you?